Hey, church family. Pastor Eric here with today's Word from the Word. I wanted to continue in our series in First Thessalonians, be looking at chapter 4 and verses 9 through 12. Now, Paul has been going through the chapter and telling them how much he appreciates them and loves them, encouraging them to lead holy and pure lives, and that's how we bring glory and honor to God. But here in this section, he comes back and he wants to make sure that they realize it's not all bad news. He's not going to chastise them. He's telling them, I love you. Your love is evident. It's one of the great things about you. Please, we all need to remember that First Thessalonians is one of the most positive books in the entire New Testament. He had a lot to commend that congregation for. He was very high on what they were doing well and how they were loving well. And there were a few things that need to be clarified, and that's what First Thessalonians is all about. So he takes the first couple of verses here, 9 through 10, and he talks about how much their love is evident, how well it's known. It includes everybody in the congregation as well as other congregations, and he commends them for that. But starting in verse 11, he alludes to one of the things that had happened, and it happens all the time, and that's that they were really wondering about when was Jesus coming back. And church family, every single generation of believers have believed they were going to be the last generation, that Jesus was coming back in their lifetime. And when we become overly fascinated by that, we become so future-oriented and heaven-oriented, we become ineffective here on earth because we're so looking to the future, we don't address the present and the fact that people need Christ, and that if he did come back, things are going to be all the more hard, all the more difficult for people to come to Christ because of the persecution that's going to come. So he addresses that issue, and in verse 11 he says, make it your ambition. It's one of the few times ambition is used in the whole scripture in a positive way. He's saying this is God's will for you. He wants you to eagerly seek to make your living with your own hands, to live quiet lives, to be people who win the respect of outsiders, and not to be dependent on anyone. These last 2 or 3 verses really speak to my heart. The idea that we need to stir the pot, and we need to be protesting and making huge statements and demonstrations is not my style. It's not what I see in the scriptures. I see believers winning people to Christ through calm and sincere spirits. I see people doing good deeds and winning the hearts of the people, because when you win people's hearts, you win souls as well. Arguing with people, making bold statements, that doesn't win souls very often. It instead creates walls and creates problems. So as a believer and as a pastor, I've always sought to say, how do we build bridges without in any way compromising the truths of Scripture? I think that's what Paul's trying to say to them, is that we need to be people who live so well that others want to live like us. He says, work with your own hands so that you are not dependent on anyone. And I think there's a large principle in there. When we don't take responsibility for taking care of ourselves and our families, then we become dependent on others. And as soon as you're dependent on somebody else, you're no longer able to focus solely on the gospel. That theme occurs over and over again. So his encouragement wasn't to make a statement, wasn't to be bold and active in ways that cause division and dissension, but rather to be people that shine, but in constant and consistent ways into the lives of people, broadcasting the love of God through our actions, our words, and our attitudes. I know that there are people who are called out there to be prophetic. They're called to proclaim truth boldly, and I would not deny anybody else's call before God. But what I see is God's call on his church to be so graceful and so loving that people are touched, people see our diligence, people see our love, and people experience how much we love God and love one another. I think that's what Paul's calling them to. So, keep reading in 1 Thessalonians. We'll continue in chapter 4, the last part of it, in our next time together. And don't forget, Saturday, 6:30, we're continuing our study in 1 Corinthians. It's going to be a great time together, and I look forward to being with you and seeing you all again soon. I love you. God bless you. Have a great day.